Once you have a brand strategy, what do you do with it? That is the conversation that we're exploring today on the Brand Gravity Show. I'm your host, psychology-driven brand strategist, Kaye Putnam, and I'm really excited about today's conversation because it's often overlooked or rushed through. And it's a really important part of the process in building a brand. My guest today is Darren Horwitz, who previously worked at Interbrand, working with brands like Humana and Thomas Reuters, and then Future Brand, working with brands like Cadillac, USAA, American Airlines. He's now the founder of an agency called 1010, which has helped over 100 brands through the rebranding implementation process. And his work has benefited brands like US Army, Johnson & Johnson, GE Healthcare, to name a few. Cannot wait for you to hear this conversation. Let's dive in to today's episode. Darren, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to chat. Let's start with a little bit of an introduction. We mentioned that you are the founder of 1010. Can you explain in layman's terms what your agency does?
Sure. First off, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Conversation with you. Sure. In layman's terms, so we specialize in helping people plan for a rebrand, build a brand, or manage it on the back end to protect their investment. But really what we're good at is rebranding, and managing your brand is really stressful. And so everybody from the C-suite down to brand managers, to frontline people, to even either customers or consumers. So what we really try and do is mitigate the stress all along that journey, no matter where you are, whether you're rebranding or you're a 10-year-old brand. So really it's getting in front of people and trying to help them manage and protect their brand as best as possible. And we do this through the lens of brand implementation, which is really, it's an umbrella word, but it's a fancy word for saying we help people get stuff done.
Amazing. I tend to focus more on the brand ideation and strategy and creative concept. So I know firsthand how valuable the work that you are doing is, because the brand doesn't really exist until you implement it, until you bring it into the world and into contact with all of the people that you're serving. Can you speak a little bit? What are some of maybe the myths or the misconceptions people have about that process?
I think the biggest one is that it's easy to take a brand and put it everywhere properly and get it into the hands of those that actually use your brand or experience your brand. I think that is probably the underestimation of what it takes to properly brand and manage a brand we see all day long. So really helping people uncover what's specific to them and what their specific needs are. And then not only identifying some of the gaps that may exist, but then really helping them figure out which levers to pull in the right order with the right budget and resources to work for them. And every company, it's interesting, every company says they're unique, and they are to a certain extent. We all, as you know, from building brands, we all need certain things, but it's what you do with them that's really unique. And so where we come in is taking it from the easy part of, oh, I need a logo, I need color, I need a strategy, I need a message. Okay, well, now what? And that's what we answer, is the now what question. What do you do with that? Who uses it? What are their nuanced needs? And we know that somebody using a PowerPoint presentation is very different than putting a sign on the wall, and they have different needs and different rules. And so we tend to geek out on that stuff. Well, at least I do. I don't know that my colleagues would agree with me, but I geek out on that stuff. And I really think I think it's great to figure out where your brand lives and how it's used, and then how to make sure that those that use your brand have what they need. So I think that's another part of this. Is part of it is when we work with organizations, it's really oftentimes a marketing centric point of view. So they're approaching it with, oh, I know my business, I know what we do, I know what we need. But what they may not know are the needs of others in their organization. If they have an HR person, they may not know what HR needs to do their day job. If they have legal writing up contracts, they certainly might understand, oh yeah, we do contracts, but what more do they need? What more does the legal person need? So I think that's another thing we experience, is working with marketers who are great at what they do and do know their brand and are very passionate, but we tend to get into every nook and cranny of where and how that brand is used. And then again, if you're not rebranding, making sure that you have tools that work for everybody, not just a marketer. So it's really making sure we can scale that out. Whether you're a big organization or a small one, it works the same way.
Amazing. Amazing. You spark a really interesting question. I think that at some point, the brand blend into marketing. It certainly should inform it, right? How do you work? And you started to touch on this, but how do you work together? How do you delineate between what you're doing and what, say, a more typical marketing agency is doing?
Yeah, interesting question. And I'm sure you probably think the same way and believe the same way. I believe your brand starts with a business strategy, and it all stems from there. What are you trying to do as a business? From there, you can start to evolve that into your brand strategy. From there, you can start to evolve that into what you're saying, how you're saying it, messaging, tone of voice, what you look like. From there, we start to think about different needs in different ways. And so to me, marketing and brand are very connected, but marketing is an execution of your brand. And so we're trying to be upstream from that, just a little bit higher level of broad strokes. How do we define the brand beyond the basics to make sure that we start to, I would say, start double click into everybody's needs. So whether it's a marketer who then takes that and double clicks into a presentation, sales enablement, or even really triple clicks into a tagline, that to me is more marketing specific. And that campaign or tagline can live for a long time, but that's a very specific strategy that's maybe connecting your business strategy through your brand strategy, through your brand into the tactics. And so marketing has tactics just like everybody else, but they have very specific needs. I would say, so interestingly, when we work with brand managers on their brand, some of the larger organizations, they're very passionate about making sure the brand guidance is in place. These are the brand rules. This is how your brand expresses itself, and you cannot deviate from those guidelines. And what we try and educate people on is that's great until you get to an ad campaign. And the ad campaign has a very specific strategy and very specific metrics that it needs to hit for shelf life, right? It has to reach certain people in a certain way. And that might be at odds with your core brand strategy. And so what we say is it needs to flex, and it needs to flex a little bit and give it a little breathing room so that it can achieve both the brand strategy and the advertising strategy. And so where we look at this and we say, okay, so what's something that is untouchable? Well, don't change your logo unless you're Google, who lives off changing their logo. And that's part of who they are, right? But don't change your logo. Don't mess with the color. As far as how you express these things, maybe there's a little bit more flexibility because you need to stand out for a specific purpose. And I think that's where we start to think about the transition from a brand strategy into the different needs and tactics at the different individual levels. Double click, triple click, specific strategies, flex a little, and we take it out of the brand policing mentality and more about brand essence, the scalability of a brand and just understanding the flex.
Amazing. As a brand nerd and practitioner, I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much for diving into that.
A little long-winded, but there's a lot in there, right?
Yes. And it's so interesting and so applicable to me, but I want to make this more broadly applicable. You mentioned that there's 5 pillars of successful brand implementation planning. Let's get down to principles. What makes a successful brand implementation?
Sure. I think it's, again, whether you're a large scale organization going through a rebrand or you're a startup in a smaller organization, I think it comes down to basic things. Once you've defined the things that you can see and that we know, the logo, the font, the basics, and that's what I would say your basic brand toolkit. Then it becomes, okay, so what do I need from here? Let me figure out all the tools, all the places my brand is going to live. Again, whether it's a small place, maybe you don't need that's okay, but you definitely are going to need a web. How are you going to have a mobile app? You're going to need some messaging. You're going to need to think about how you get out to reach your customers. Is it an email campaign? Is it a physical postcard? What is it? So let's figure out what you need. As we start to think about that, how long is it going to take me to build these things out? Now, it may not be every single headline on every single sales kit or every single postcard, but I definitely need a tool or a template to define the style. What should this look like? So how long is it going to take me to gather this information and to start to build the basic tools that I need? Then we start to think about who does the work. Is this something that you can do yourself? or should you be working with a third party or an expert? Now, there's all different variations of there. And when we work with clients and we come across this question of, can you do the work yourself? Oftentimes the answer is yes, I can. But then it comes down to timing and bandwidth. So what needs to be done? When are you looking to put your brand out there? And do you really have the bandwidth, or do you have the budget to go hire somebody to take the headache away and just get it off the plate? Or maybe personally, I don't know how to code websites. I know a website is needed. I know what it should look like. Once it's designed, I don't know how to get it onto the web page. So I would look for an expert. So then we think about, how are we going to get our brand out there? And again, this is from the mindset of, maybe I'm launching a brand. So how do I get it out there? Do I have a launch? Again, am I doing some sort of marketing or media play? Am I advertising? Is it local advertising? Am I doing friends and family soft launching? What am I trying? And then the big question is, and how much does all this cost? And what should I budget for over time? Not just for today, but what does the next year or 2 years look like? And we all do this. I mean, whether it's a personal budgeting exercise that I do with my house, or even within my own business, I budget, how much do I want to put towards marketing? How much do I want to put towards paying people? How much does every project cost me? So we look at it that way. But I think those are the basics. What do I need? How long will it take? Who's going to do the work? How are we getting this out there? And then, of course, let's make sure we put money aside, because probably work with someone to define your brand and think about how to design your logo. But most people stop there, and that's not the end point. So that's what I think about. Again, large or small, individual, Fortune 100, principles are still the same.
I love that. Thank you for outlining all of that. I think that the psychology of change is really interesting. I know that you have some really interesting blog posts about how change can be hard, both internal in the organization, and then there's also a bit of lag time externally as well as people adapt to change. I'd like to explore both of those, if that's okay with you. Internal, let's start there. I see it kind of as two levels. How do we get stakeholders on board, if there are any beyond you yourself? And then how do we get team members engaged and feeling ownership over a new brand?
I love it. So there's two things to every brand. There's the stuff, where your brand lives, which is pretty easy to think about. And then there's the people. And changing the stuff is one thing, but changing people is really very different. And so what we think about is, first, let's do a little audience segmentation. Let's figure out like-minded people and like groups. So you can think about this from leadership and C-suite, or your board, or your investors. You can think about this from those that are creatives in your world. You can think about this from your salespeople, and they all play different roles. And I think the trick is to figure out what their needs are and to start to engage with them early on and really give them something that's tangible. One is to talk about what you're going to do. What are you changing? And more importantly, why is this change happening? Let's get everybody rallied around the why. And the why story is really critical, both internally and externally. Why is this change happening? Then I think it's about explaining to individuals what your expectations of them are, of those people. So are they to know every aspect of your brand? Are they only to know the why story and be able to talk to their customers? Are they supposed to answer questions differently? And once you can figure out what their role is, then you can start to think about how you engage them, what their needs are, how you train them, what tools they might need. And you get in front of them and you start to have these conversations. And I think that's the other part of it. It's a dialogue. So it's not so one-sided top down. It's more about, this is what we're trying to achieve. Here's how we're approaching this. We'd like you to be a part of this. Here's your role. What is it that you need from us to be successful in this role? And from there, then you can start to get into the tactics of what type of training, what type of messaging, what sort of engagement exercises. And then that can all be mapped out through normal course of business to figure out what's needed, whether it's emails again, or physical posters, or if anybody's in the office now, but really thinking through the socialization. So we've seen this we had a very successful client, Helena Troy, who you may not know Helena Troy, but you know their brands, OXO, Dry Bar, things like that. They went through a rebrand. And one of the exercises was around making sure that every one of their businesses felt like they were a part of something big. So it was less about, I run OXO, it wasn't Dry Bar at the time. They didn't have that in their portfolio, but the idea is the same. rather than you be a line item on a larger sheet and you have your own company and your own P&L, together we are better. Let's figure out how to do this. And then they started with leadership. They spent a lot of time getting senior leaders onto this journey and buy-in around what was happening, why it was happening, the benefits of what was going on. And that was at the senior level, excuse me, before they ever engaged an employee. Once they got the leadership buy-in, then they started working with their HR team to start to think about how to translate this into messaging and activities within the employee base across different organizations. And then from there, they had to think about, well, how do we then take this? And to your point earlier, how do we take this externally? And how do we ensure that our people know how to take this externally, as well as our messaging, our corporate sites are all saying the same thing. We're treating our brands equally and our companies equally, and we're promoting this message of we're greater together as one. So it was really interesting to see them doing it well, and then how it manifested itself through different engagement activities with their employees.
I love the example. So that's a great example. I'm curious, do you have any other examples of effective why stories that some of your clients have used to anchor their big change initiative around?
Yeah, you see common themes in healthcare. Healthcare had a lot of acquisitions. They still do, but heavy in acquisitions and healthcare systems bringing private practices into the fold or smaller practices into larger healthcare systems. So oftentimes they really wanted the why story to be around how coming together as one larger system was critical and beneficial to the patients and making it around the benefits to the patient. But this idea of coming together as one was their why story. Again, I think there's a business aspect that you always want to tie it back to. I think if I'm remembering a lot of the work that we do, coming together as one, maybe the business strategy has evolved and they're trying to approach their audience base in a different way. In the case of the Army, we worked on the US Army recently. They just went through a rebrand, and part of their rationale for rebranding was how they were reaching potential recruits and wanting to be more digital focused, wanted to be more modern. And so that was the impetus of why they were going through a rebrand. There were other reasons to it, but that was a really critical why story. I think equally as important as why we're doing this is also thinking through many times we're not just ditching our brand. We want to evolve it, but we want to take our legacy, all the great things that we've done, and bring it forward. Or more importantly, we're not really showcasing what we do well to the best that we can. So why we were doing this is to better showcase all the things that we do in a great way and the benefits, and making sure that we're all there together to bring this forward. So there's several different reasons, but I think those are some consistent ones that I'm seeing.
Yeah. Those are incredible examples. Thank you. You talk a bit about brand governance. So like after this whole process, what are some of the key principles or like lessons that we can learn from big brands as potentially smaller startup or other types of smaller brands that we can apply to make sure that we're maintaining both brand consistency, but also our brand equity or brand value over time?
Sure. There are a lot of things that people can do. I think the biggest misconception is once you launch your brand, you flip the switch and you walk away and we're done. And that's not it. Brands are constantly evolving. Even we're small. We're a small organization. We're very nimble. We are constantly evaluating our own materials, our own messaging, how we approach things. We're trying to stay not only relevant in the needs of our customers' minds, but also in where society is as all. It's just thinking through post-pandemic, how we approach our work is very different now than what we were doing pre-pandemic. And it's exciting. It's great. But I think it's around really not just walking away. So maybe it's about thinking, oh, I use this item every single day and I'm starting from scratch. Why? That's wasting time, money, and I'm doing it differently every time. And I'm not saying take something, wash, rinse, repeat. What I'm saying is there are efficiencies that you can find in your daily activities that will make your life a lot easier, but also maintain brand consistency. I think messaging is incredibly important to stay on top of. Again, you probably have core messages in how you reach people, but over time, maybe they need to become more nuanced to reach different audiences. So if you're thinking about how you grow your business, maybe your audience members aren't the same. Maybe you're thinking about a new segmentation. So we want to think about not ditching our core message, but evolving it and growing it. I think about even in our designs, when I look at when we launched our company 8 years ago, the way we presented our work to now, I'm embarrassed, frankly. I look at it and I come from a branding world and I look at this, I'm like, how did I even think that was good? But it was what I started with and it was what I needed. And it was going back to the basics. I needed a PowerPoint story. I needed to get out there and talk to people. I need to quickly get to what I do. And I frankly didn't have a paycheck coming to me at the time. So I needed to get out there quickly. So I did what I had to do. But then I looked at it and I said, okay, I need to be honest with myself. I need to look at this in a more critical way, think about how it's being received. And I think the other thing is ask people. Go out there and ask your audiences what they think. Go ask your employees. Now, the watch out is everybody has an opinion and you may not always like the response you get. But I think if you can formulate your questions into a way that is constructive and you can consider the feedback and then consider everyone does have a point of view and they have a need, how do we evolve to reach them better? And it doesn't mean 30 messages to 30 people. It means maybe 4 messages to 30 people or 3 messages or 3 different presentations. For us, we have 2 different core audiences. We have businesses and then we have agencies. And what we do is the same for both, but how we speak to them is just different. And so again, we look at that story and we realize, oh, they have different needs. Let's evolve that. So I would say, don't ever stop evolving and think about it. And maybe your business has shifted to where now it is time to think about brand evolution. And it could be as simple as not changing a logo, but maybe changing the rest of your visuals to a refresh. So, new imagery, different colors, maybe a slightly different way of using our fonts in the visual way. So I think you can evolve slowly without major investment, but definitely paying attention to it over time and asking yourself.
Yeah, 100%. I resonate with that a lot. And I think a lot of people, especially, so we're recording this in the fall of 2023, especially in the small business world, there seems to be a tension where people are returning back to, like, is this actually working? Have I built a business that people are resonating with? And I think that that's how and it can be a really great time to take a look at that. How do you help companies decide if it is a refresh versus a rebrand?
So typically we advise them to work with brand strategists. So we're implementation strategists. So we're more tactics. But if we have clients who are coming to us, we had one client, it was a healthcare system out of South Bend, and their business was shifting and they knew they weren't. So all the reasons we talked about earlier, they weren't getting credit for all the great things they were doing. The needs of patients have evolved. They're competing with other healthcare systems in their region that are more well-known. And so they came to us and said, hey, we're thinking about doing this. What do we do? And we said, okay, this may not be about a logo change. So let's take a step back and figure out, let's baseline what's working with what's not. So there was a little bit of research that was going into this. As we started to go down the path, we approached it in parallel paths. We looked at it as one was, let's look at a visual refresh using the existing logo that people know and recognize. But let's prepare ourselves for a logo evolution down the road if we need it, so that we can build a new visual, verbal expression of our brand, same logo. But if we get to the point that we want to go, this new system will work with that. So we were with that in mind. If you know that, you can go into this and you can think about how to do that. But I think it starts with this idea of, again, has your business evolved? Has your customer base evolved? Do you think your materials are still relevant and reaching them in a way that resonates with them? And then if you're going to do this, start to ask yourself through the planning process, what's it really going to take? And just another quick example, oftentimes we were asked in one case, it was a credit union who was considering a new name, a new logo, or just a visual refresh. And they asked us to consider all 3 of these things. And we were able to go in, working with them to go through the planning process, everything we talked about earlier today, figure out what they do, and then start to price out the different implications of each of those scenarios. With a logo change, as a credit union, they have physical signs and branches. That's very expensive.
Yeah.
With a name change, you have to engage people early on so they know what's happening and get used to the new name before you ever get to the visual. But with a refresh, you might be able to keep your physical signs and branches and really just think about replenishing your marketing materials or your branch materials over time. And it's much more cost effective. So I think there's a range of approaches that one can take where it's not just simply let's rebrand because we don't like our stuff. I think it's about figuring out what's not working, how to fix it, and the most efficient economical way to get there for people. Does that address your question?
It does.
Yeah.
And I hope you don't mind this question out of left field, but I'm curious.
Oh gosh, this will be good.
Using yourself and your business as a case study, what are you currently thinking about changing or maybe going through a change process yourself on?
Sure. So we've done this. As I mentioned, our earlier color palette was yellow and black, all caps on the font, and it was very basic. It was what we needed to get going, but I like to know, why are we yelling at people with all caps? Like that's
I was going to say, it's like
talking about the psychology of branding. I mean, so it was this, and I learned this from working on American Airlines when American was rebranding. I was on the project team, and one of the things that came out of this is let's change our case. We're yelling at people flying because it's all caps. So I took that and I said, why are we doing this? So we started with our visual system, and what was yellow and black and all caps has evolved into purple, orange, green, and blue, a different font, a different way of reaching people, a lighter weight font. So again, times evolve, designs evolve, we evolve with it. So that's on the creative side. The messaging we talked about, our audiences, how we reach them, different needs. But I think more recently, two things. Going through the pandemic, what we used to do working with organizations was in the room through workshops. And I loved that. I really loved being on the road, meeting people, reading their expressions. I'm older, gray hair. My team is much younger. When the pandemic hit, I was forced to go onto Zoom and conduct work sessions virtually, and I was struggling. But with the help of the team and encouragement, I got through it. And now I love being home with my family. I certainly miss some of the perks of travel, but I can work through this. So that was a huge evolution of how are we going to keep our business going through this time in a way that works for others? And we did that. We're introducing technology now into what used to be cataloging touch points on a poster on the wall with people in the room is now done through an online survey. As I take that, I'm starting to evolve our core offering of planning and how do we start to scale this in a way so it's not just Fortune 100 companies, it's also the individual. How do we make it accessible to people? And how do we leverage technology to do this where it's not all about having to work with me or my team? It's about, are there ways that we can bring this online and have people be self-help users, which I think is phenomenal. And I think the other thing that we're doing, when we look at the plan, build, manage framework that we use, thinking through how companies are not going through a rebrand, but our core offering is about rebranding. How do we use that? And now we're looking at acquisitions. And the thinking is that the need is the same. It's an established brand on one side, but you're bringing another brand into the fold. And it's not just the tactics. Again, this is the easy part. But you have a whole company that's losing their identity overnight. How do you acquire them in a way that brings them through a journey, gets them up to speed, and you can teach them to be your brand champion without them being disgruntled about an acquisition? So I'm very excited. We're working with companies now on applying this, and I'm so thrilled to be able to come out of this with a new way to do our core offering for a different audience, for a different purpose, but yet based on what we really do well. And I think, again, that just is an example of how we're evolving ourselves. Plus, I'm trying to get better at our own designs, which I think is I'm happy with now, but I'm not changing my logo. I can tell you that. I love my logo. We hired somebody to do it. I'm actually very happy with it. But I think there's opportunities through imagery, through storytelling, through, case studies. There's other ways to bolster what we do. And I will not stop evolving our brand and our work. So I think that I encourage others to do the same. It's exciting. It's fun.
It is.
It's cool.
Oh my gosh.
How long have you been doing what you do for your own business?
I started doing freelance work in brand strategy in 2013. And then I think right around that same time, I launched my personal brand. I've gone the route of selling courses, making it more accessible to smaller businesses. And I'm really excited that you're going in that direction too, because businesses need this. Businesses get so stuck in the doing. They get stuck in the process of change that if you can lead them through it, it's a really valuable resource. I'm so
I,
excited.
I think that's great. And thank you. But I think that part of this is, for me, it reinvigorates me as a practitioner to come in and not just keep doing the same thing that I do every day. And again, every client is different and their needs are different. But what I'm now able to do is all the reasons that I went into business for myself and what jazzes me about everything that we're doing and what I'm really passionate about, I'm finding that passion again in a different way. And that's why I think as a small business, it's really cool if you can kind of get yourself motivated. And again, going back to your question on getting people engaged and reaching them, I don't think it's any different for an employee. How do you engage with them consistently in a way that keeps them jazzed? What is it that they need to evolve your company or your business or your sales? And I would look inward with people and ask them, ask for ideas. What gets them excited? And then I think you can connect the dots between that. So that's, excuse me, after doing this for 8 years on my own, I really am jazzed about getting back out there and rethinking how we reach people, being able to talk about it and solving someone's needs and taking some of that stress away. So that's what gets me up every day.
I love it. I love it. I love hearing that passion. It's amazing. I have one more question, but before I get to that question, where can people find you? Where can they learn more from you?
Thank you. So our website is a great way to reach me, 1010group.com/brand gravity. And 1010 is all spelled out, TENTENGROUP.com/brand gravity. LinkedIn is also a great way, but coming through the website, you have access to getting in contact with us, reach out to us, and we can get there. LinkedIn, again, is also fine if you want to learn more about me personally and my journey. But on the website, you can hear or see some of the work we've done and get an idea of how we approach things and who help.
Amazing. And my final question is, for that entrepreneur, that brand manager, brand visionary that's listening, that is thinking about a rebrand, they have an idea, maybe they've even done the rebrand, and they're asking themselves that question, now what? What do you recommend their first action step be, or what should they be focused on?
Interesting. I would say pause, breathe, enjoy the work that you've just gone through on this journey, and then take a pulse on how it's being perceived out in the field. Give it some time. Let it marinate in this for a little bit. But if you're talking about the literal next steps between the basics, I think it's about building your marketing materials. It's about making sure your website is clear and concise. We've gone through several iterations of our website because what we think is clear and concise is not, right? I have tunnel vision. I can speak jargon all day long. Hopefully I'm not doing it here, but the things that I think are important may not be what the customers think are important. And that was a hard thing to swallow for me. So I would say, give it a chance to breathe, see what the reactions are, ask people for their inputs, and then think about where you need to focus to bolster your brand to support your first and foremost way of doing business. Here's a great example. I used to be hell-bent on doing business cards. I love business cards, really thick business cards that you could hurt somebody with, not that I want to, but just really substantial. Who uses a business card now? And it hurts me. I know salespeople do. I know there are people that do use business cards. I'm not saying let's get rid of business cards, but it may not be your primary need. So what's important to me may not be what nobody cares. The people we work with, they don't want my business card. They want to know how to reach me, Slack, email, phone calls, just be there to communicate. I don't need this, heavyweight piece of paper we don't want to use paper anymore. Anyway, so the point being that thinking through what resonates the most with others, I think is a really good way to check yourself on where you go next. Is it clear? Is it concise? Is it helpful to others? Does it allow somebody to come to you and say, I really get what you do and I'd like to hear more? That I think is the most basic thing that you can do. And then you'll learn what's missing. Maybe you don't have the imagery that you need. Maybe you don't have a slide that you need to share with somebody. You don't have a case study that you need. You'll find it. and you'll grow with it and keep growing.
Darren, thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us today. I learned so much and I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Brand Gravity Show. I appreciate you being here. I will see you in the next episode.